Hello, everyone. My name is Jean-Francois Pelletier. It's a French name. I live in Montreal, Canada, but I am also an assistant clinical professor at the Department of Psychiatry at Yale University. And I'm also a proud peer support worker. And in the Montreal area, I'm a specialist in the clinical activities to promote recovery through peer support. I would have loved to be with you today, but we face some language difficulties, and I was asked to maybe to do a presentation to introduce recovery, personal recovery, which is quite different from clinical recovery. Clinical recovery would be simply less symptoms of a mental health, of mental illness or addiction disorders. Personal recovery is more about finding hope, finding dignity. We talk about personal recovery, the recovery of the dignity of the person as full-fledged citizen. So I will read some parts of this book, and it will be subtitled in Greek. Thank you for the organizing committee, for people invited me. And eventually, if it is conclusive, well, maybe we will translate the whole book in Greek. Enjoy it. Recovery in mental health has been defined as a vision, as a movement, as a conceptual model, or as an immanent organizing principle. Recovery is now a priority goal of mental and behavioral health care around the world. In 2010, leaders in the United States, including people with lived experience of mental health and addiction issues, with the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, the SAMHSA, they met to develop a practical definition of recovery with its set of 10 guiding principles. This working definition reads like this: following mental illness or substance use disorders, recovery is a process of change in which people improve their health and well-being, lead independent lives, and strive to achieve their full potential. First, recovery springs from hope. The belief that recovery is real is the essential and motivating key message for a better future. We can overcome the internal and external challenges, barriers, and obstacles we face. We can do it, and we do it. Hope is thus internalized, which can be fostered by our peers, families, caregivers, community partners, and others. Hope is the catalyst for the recovery process. Second, recovery is person-driven. Self-determination is the foundation of recovery as we define our own life goals, our own trajectory to achieve them. We optimize our autonomy by guiding, controlling, and exercising our choices in the services that promote our recovery and our resilience. In doing so, we empower ourselves to make informed decisions, undertake our recovery, build on our own strength, and take or regain control over our lives. Third, recovery takes several paths. We are unique people, and we have distinct needs, strengths, preferences, goals, culture, and backgrounds, including experiences of trauma that affect and determine the path of our recovery. Recovery relies on the multiple capacities, strengths, talents, coping skills, resources, and intrinsic values of each of us. Our recovery journeys are highly personalized. They can include professional clinical treatment, medication, family and school support, faith-based approaches, peer support, and other approaches. Recovery is non-linear, characterized by continued growth and improved functioning, which may include occasional setbacks. These setbacks are an integral part of the recovery process, but they are not inevitable. It is essential to foster the resilience of each individual and of our families. For some, the goal will be to abstain from consuming alcohol, illicit drugs, and non-prescription drugs. In some cases, recovery journeys can be triggered by creating a favorable environment. Fourth, recovery is holistic. Recovery indeed encompasses a person's entire life, including our mind, our body, our intellect, and our community. This includes personal care, family, housing, employment, transportation, education, clinical treatment of mental illness and addiction, services and supports, primary health care, dental care services, complementary and alternative services, religion, spirituality, creativity, social relations, and community participation. The range of services and supports available must be integrated and coordinated. Fifth, recovery is supported by our peers and partners. Mutual support and self-help groups, including sharing of knowledge and skills acquired through experience, as well as learning, play an invaluable role in recovery. By helping others and giving back to the community, we help each other. Peer support and services are important resources to help us on our recovery journey to wellness. Professionals can also play an important role in the recovery process by providing clinical treatment and other services to help us and as we choose to undertake our recovery. Sixth, recovery is relational and builds on social relationships. An important factor in the recovery process is the presence and participation of people who believe in our ability to be in recovery, who show hope, support, and encouragement, and which also suggest strategies and resources for change. Family members, peers, caregivers, faith groups, community members, and other allies are essential support networks. Through these relationships and networks, we leave behind unhealthy or unsatisfying roles and engage in new roles: partner, caregiver, friend, student, employee, etc. Roles that lead to a greater sense of self-worth and belonging, to the uniqueness of our individuality, to autonomy, inclusion, and community participation. Seventh, recovery has cultural roots and is influenced by culture. Culture and cultural context is in all its representations, including values, traditions, and beliefs, are essential to our resolve and unique journey of recovery. Services should be culturally based, proactive, consistent, and culturally competent, as well as personalized to meet the unique needs of each individual. Eighth, recovery is promoted by awareness of trauma. Trauma, such as physical or sexual abuse, domestic violence, war, natural disasters, etc., are often precursors or associated with alcohol or drugs consumption, mental health problems, and other related relationship problems. Services and supports should be aware of our trauma in order to promote safety, physical and emotional safety, foster mutual trust, promote choice, autonomy, and collaboration. Ninth, recovery draws on our strength, those of our families and communities. Individuals, families, and communities have assets and resources that form the foundation of recovery. In addition, we have a responsibility to take charge of our personal care and our recovery journey. We must be encouraged to speak for ourselves. Families and those around us have a responsibility to support us. Communities have a responsibility to provide opportunities and resources to fight discrimination and promote social inclusion and recovery. As people in recovery, we also have a social responsibility and should be given the opportunity to join with our peers to collectively talk about our strengths, needs, aims, desires, and aspirations. If there were only one word to choose from to sum up what recovery can mean, it would be the word hope. However, hope is something that is unique to everyone. No one can define or for another person what is a source of hope for them. On the other hand, what we can identify together are obstacles that can arise in the expression of hope. Among these barriers are the images and social representations that people have of mental illness and of people living with mental health issues. These are called stereotypes, which are preconceived thoughts patterns that one group of people have about another group of people. These stereotypes are the result of a whole imaginary world which does not reflect reality and which distorts the perception of facts. And when these false representations become judgments based on such unverified impressions, they are prejudgments, prejudice. Stereotypes about people living with mental illness or people said to be mentally ill include blame. It is suggested that these people could take care of themselves if they wanted to. There is also the presumption of dangerousness. Sensationalist newspaper headlines often suggest links between crimes committed and a diagnosis of mental illness, whereas the vast majority of violent crimes are perpetrated by people who have no such diagnosis. In addition, people living with mental illness are actually more often victims of violence than the rest of the population. The third component of stigma is the presumption of incompetence. We then insist on the cost that the care and support measures can represent by also suggesting that the concerned people are only a burden and that they neither can nor will contribute to the collective effort. If only stereotypes had no more serious consequences than keeping those who think so in error, we could say, well, too bad for these people. Unfortunately, stereotypes, which by definition are not based on reality, have consequences for the reality of the people about whom these stereotypes are held. They condition the way the general public behaves towards people who are stereotyped. These people, who are victims of prejudice, will be said to be stigmatized. That is, they are given an identity label in advance on the basis of preconceived ideas. This is called social stigmatization, which means stigmatize people to an inferior status and therefore no longer have the same chances of realizing themselves or of being recognized for who they really are. They are no longer treated as equals, for example, when they face discrimination in the labor market or segregated when they are grouped together against their will in closed spaces or in ghettos. When it comes to mental health, probably more so than with any other health condition, a medical diagnosis quite quickly turns into a social diagnosis. Social in the sense that such a diagnosis becomes a motive to undermine the dignity of the person when used to denigrate them. When prejudices translate into concrete harmful actions towards a minority, it is possible to denounce and even possibly prosecute the perpetrators of such acts. In democratic societies, there are laws which prohibit such practices. On the other hand, it is much more difficult to tackle stigma in this way when it is internalized and when the people who are victims of it see and belittle themselves through the lenses of distorting stereotypes. There is indeed social stigma and self-stigma. The first comes from outside and the second, inflicted on oneself, comes from within. Self-stigmatization is based, first of all, on awareness of and knowledge of the existence of stereotypes in society. The second step is to endorse those stereotypes of society about mentally ill people. And the third step of self-stigma is ultimately to apply a stereotypical view to ourselves. Once again, if the consequences of self-stigma remain only conceptually and self-image, one might be content to think that it is a shame. Unfortunately, several studies show that the effect of self-stigma does not end at the stage of self-image. This effect is reflected in the person's behavior and decisions to whether or not act to change things. The third the distorted self-image then affects psychosocial mediators who are intermediaries between what the person perceives and of themselves and what they do in society. Among those psychosocial mediators, there is self-esteem and the feeling of efficiency. When these mediators are negatively affected by the self-stigma that distorts the self-image, a demoralizing effect then continues until it limits the individual's ability and willingness to take charge. All this undermines the empowerment of the person and the possibility of helping them in this direction. Low self-esteem also affects the overall intention to seek and receive help. And when the feeling of efficiency turns into a feeling of ineffectiveness instead, the person becomes discouraged in advance for fear of failing in their attempts to improve their lot and being recognized as a failed person. The self-image distorted by self-stigma, itself fueled by social stigma, therefore has a very real negative impact on the attitudes and behaviors of the person in relation to the pursuit of their life goals. This whole gear is what Patrick Corrigan called the why try effect. And we will not be surprised to observe that persons who do not try to improve their lot and who do not get help to improve their ability to improve their lot either, well, they do not succeed. Would the loop be closed? So conferring veracity on images and social representations that we nevertheless said to be false? If that were the case, it would be indeed heartbreaking. Fortunately, the story does not end there. Interventions can indeed effectively counter and even reverse the why try effect. It is possible to develop a positive identity by interacting with members of the same group of individuals who face a common stigma. This helps to develop and maintain better self-esteem, both individually and collectively. This is why recovery-oriented interventions rely on the presence of consumers in the provision of care and services itself. These service users, especially the trained peer support workers, personify the hope for possible change as they are themselves examples of success and empowerment who very eloquently contradict fatalistic stereotypes. They have succeeded in freeing themselves from the grip of social stigmatization exerted on them as on the rest of society, and then that on self-stigma that they may have experienced at some point in their life. Peer support workers therefore embody hope and are trained to communicate it by fostering relationships of equality and reciprocity free from any stereotypes. And peer support workers, therefore, are there to help the service users to find their own personal recovery journey that may include or not progress on clinical recovery, which is about containing symptoms. Recovery is not synonymous with cure. We talk here about personal recovery, the recovery of the dignity of the person as a full citizen. Thank you.